The Galactic Council chambers buzzed with barely contained mirth as Ambassador Zethkari of the Vraxian hegemony concluded his presentation. Holographic displays showed detailed analysis of human military capabilities, social structures, and what the galaxy considered their most glaring weakness. Honored delegates, Zethkari's four eyes gleamed with amusement. After 3 standard cycles of observation, we can definitively conclude that humans possess no true assassin caste, no shadow guilds, no genetically modified killers bred in darkness. They are quite simply inadequate for covert operations. Ripples of agreement echoed through the chamber. The Kethmaran representative, whose species had perfected the art of poisoncraft over millennia, chittered with laughter. They send their warriors charging directly at enemies, shouting battle cries like primitives. Where is the subtlety? The patience? The art? High Counselor Yethron, a being whose own people could phase through solid matter for perfect infiltration, nodded sagely. This explains their rapid technological advancement but poor strategic positioning. They compensate for their inability to eliminate key targets through brute force and overwhelming numbers. The presentation continued with clips of human conflicts, soldiers in bright uniforms marching in formation, pilots engaging in aerial dogfights with obvious exhaust trails, naval battles conducted in broad daylight with massive, easily detected vessels. Even their special forces operations seemed laughably straightforward. Rappelling from helicopters, using explosives that created enormous noise and light shows. Observe their entertainment media. Zethkari gestured to another hologram showing human movies and books. Their fictional assassins are theatrical, emotional creatures who inevitably reveal themselves through dramatic confrontations. They lack the cold calculation necessary for true elimination work. Their killers make speeches, form attachments, seek recognition. The Zerathi delegate, whose crystalline form could blend perfectly with most mineral environments, resonated with harmonic laughter. We've monitored their criminal organizations as well. Even their so-called hitmen are crude, obvious operators who rely on projectile weapons and leave abundant evidence. They lack the sophisticated biotoxins, dimensional weapons, or psionic abilities that mark true assassin cultures. What the Council didn't understand was that they were looking at humanity's official face, the face humans wanted the galaxy to see. For 3 years, Earth's governments had carefully orchestrated this perception. Every military operation the aliens observed had been deliberately chosen. Every piece of media they accessed had been specifically selected. Every criminal they monitored had been allowed to operate precisely because of their incompetence. The real work happened in shadows so deep that even other humans rarely glimpsed it. At that very moment, as the Galactic Council laughed at humanity's supposed inadequacies, a human moved through the ventilation systems of the Vraxian embassy on Kepler 442b. The figure was small, compact with movements that suggested liquid flowing through the metal ducts. No detection equipment registered the presence. No guards noticed the barely perceptible changes in airflow. Sarah Chen, codenamed Wolverine, had spent 18 months preparing for this single infiltration. She spoke 17 alien languages fluently, understood the biochemistry of 43 species, and had memorized the daily routines of every significant figure in the Vraxian diplomatic mission. Her body had been subtly modified, not obviously like the galaxy's known assassin breeds, but in ways that appeared completely human while enhancing capabilities far beyond baseline. The Vraxians had been selling Earth's coordinates and military intelligence to hostile species. The evidence was scattered across their embassy's quantum-encrypted databases, protected by security systems that had never been breached. The Vraxian military considered their encryption mathematically impossible to crack within 1,000 standard years. They hadn't accounted for human creativity. Chen didn't need to crack the encryption. She needed to become it. For months she had studied Vraxian mathematics, philosophy, and cognitive patterns. She understood how their minds worked, how they structured information, how they thought about problems. Now suspended in the embassy's central data core, she input commands that weren't hacking attempts, but rather communications in the mathematical language the Vraxian computers expected from their own kind. The quantum barriers recognized her inputs as legitimate Vraxian thought patterns and dissolved. While the Galactic Council mocked humanity's lack of subtlety, Chen downloaded terabytes of data proving the Vraxian betrayal. More importantly, She planted information that would fracture the alliance between the Vraxians and their buyers. The planted data was so perfectly crafted that it would seem to come from the buyers themselves, evidence of their plans to eventually betray and consume the Vraxians once humanity was eliminated. But Chen's mission extended beyond simple espionage. 3 Vraxian officials were scheduled to die tonight, deaths that would appear completely natural and unconnected. Heart failure caused by a compound that mimicked natural aging, a stroke triggered by sound frequencies that Vraxian physiology couldn't detect, but that caused specific resonances in their neural tissue, an allergic reaction to a substance their own food preparers would introduce, believing it to be a harmless flavor enhancer. The compounds had been in place for weeks. Chen hadn't needed to carry them in. They were created from materials already present in the embassy, through chemical reactions that would occur naturally given the right catalysts. Catalysts that would be introduced through the environmental systems in precisely the right sequence. As Chen completed her work, she reflected on the galaxy's fundamental misunderstanding of human nature. They saw the absence of obvious assassin castes and assumed humans lacked the capability for covert elimination. They didn't understand that humanity's greatest strength lay in their diversity and adaptability. Humans didn't need a separate caste of killers because they could transform anyone into one. An accountant could become a poisoner. A teacher could become an infiltrator. A chef could become a saboteur. The galaxy looked for specialized predators and missed the fact that humans were persistence hunters, who could adopt any role, learn any skill, become anyone necessary. More importantly, humans understood something the galaxy had forgotten in its specialization. The best assassins were those who didn't look like assassins. They were ordinary people who could walk through any society, fit into any group, earn trust and access through simple humanity. The Vraxians had security designed to detect the known assassin species, beings who phase through matter, who could alter their biological signatures, who possessed natural invisibility or telepathic abilities. Their systems weren't designed to notice a human janitor who had worked in the embassy for 8 months, who made friends with the staff, who had earned complete trust through simple competence and warmth. Chen extracted through the same route she had entered, leaving no trace of her presence. By morning, 3 Vraxian officials would be dead. Their alliance with humanity's enemies would be shattered by suspicion and paranoia, and Earth would have access to intelligence networks spanning half the galaxy. The universe would continue laughing at humanity's lack of assassins, never realizing that the most dangerous predators were the ones you never saw coming. The deaths began exactly as Chen had orchestrated them. Ambassador Zeth Kari collapsed during his morning meal, clutching his chest as his primary heart seized. The compound that killed him had been synthesized from trace minerals in the embassy's water recycling system, triggered by a catalyst released when he activated his personal environmental controls. To Vraxian medical scanners, it appeared to be a natural cardiac event, brought on by the stress of his diplomatic duties. Senior military attaché Vorth Ak died 3 hours later while reviewing intelligence reports. The subsonic frequency that liquefied specific neural pathways in his brainstem was generated by the harmonic interaction of the embassy's ventilation system with a minor adjustment Chen had made to his office's acoustic dampeners. The sound was completely inaudible to Vraxian hearing, and the brain damage appeared identical to a rare but documented genetic condition. Intelligence Director Kreshtai's death was the most elegant. She had always prided herself on her sophisticated palate, often requesting exotic flavor compounds for her meals. The substance that triggered her fatal allergic reaction had been introduced by her own food preparation staff, who believed they were adding a rare delicacy from her homeworld. The compound was harmless to most Vraxians, but Kreshtai had a specific genetic marker that made it lethally toxic. A marker Chen had identified from medical records obtained during her months of preparation. By the time the embassy medical staff realized they were dealing with multiple deaths, Chen was already 3 star systems away, having left on a routine commercial transport as a minor trade representative for a human agricultural consortium. The Vraxian investigation that followed was thorough and sophisticated. They suspected assassination immediately. 3 senior officials dying within hours was too convenient to be coincidence. They brought in their finest forensic specialists, experts who could detect molecular traces left by known assassin species. They analyzed every biosignature, every chemical residue, every electromagnetic fluctuation in the embassy for the past month. They found nothing. The security recording showed only familiar faces, embassy staff, regular visitors, delivery personnel who had all been thoroughly vetted. No unknown persons had entered restricted areas. No unusual substances had been detected by their sensors. No energy signatures matched any known assassination techniques. The Vraxian High Command was forced to conclude that either their officials had died of remarkable coincidence, or they were dealing with an entirely unknown form of assassination technology. They chose to believe the former, rather than admit their security could be so thoroughly compromised. But the real masterpiece of Chen's operation wasn't the deaths themselves. It was the information she had planted. As Vraxian intelligence officers combed through their compromised databases, they began finding evidence that their supposed allies, the Kethmoran, had been planning to betray them all along. The documents were perfect forgeries, written in authentic Kethmoran cipher, and containing details that only genuine intelligence could provide. They outlined plans to eliminate Vraxian leadership once humanity was defeated, then claim Earth's resources for the Kethmoran collective. The documents included detailed biological profiles of Vraxian physiology, specifically noting vulnerabilities that could be exploited for assassination. Within days, the Vraxian Kethmoran alliance was fracturing under mutual suspicion and accusations. Meanwhile, human intelligence agencies across Earth were quietly celebrating the most successful deep-cover operation in their history. But they were also preparing for the inevitable consequences. The Galactic Council would eventually realize that their assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. Sarah Chen sat in a debriefing room buried 3 kilometers beneath the Swiss Alps, facing a panel of officials who officially didn't exist. The room itself didn't exist on any architectural plans. The entire facility was a ghost, maintained by people whose identities were layered so deeply that even they sometimes forgot their original names. The Vraxians will run comparative analysis on all known assassin species, said Director Harrison, a woman whose official record stated she had died in a car accident 15 years earlier. When they can't match the methodology to any known capability, they'll start questioning their assumptions about human limitations. Chen nodded, still feeling the strange emptiness that always followed deep cover missions. For 8 months, she had been maintenance technician Sarah Voss, a cheerful human who cleaned floors and fixed air recyclers while making friends with her alien co-workers. That identity had been so carefully constructed, so thoroughly lived, that part of her mourned its death. The question is whether this accelerates their timeline for direct action against Earth, continued Dr. Reyes, the agency's chief xenopsychologist. We've demonstrated capability they didn't know we possessed. That makes us more dangerous, but also potentially more valuable as allies or slaves. The planted intelligence should buy us time, Chen replied. The Vraxians and Kethmorans will be too busy investigating each other to coordinate attacks on Earth for several months at minimum. And the operational intelligence we extracted gives us detailed information on 17 other species. Military capabilities. What none of them said aloud was the darker truth. This mission had been a test case. Earth's intelligence services had been preparing for potential galactic conflict since first contact, but they had needed to understand their own capabilities against alien targets. Chen's success proved that humans could operate effectively against advanced alien societies, but it also meant the Shadow War had officially begun. Across the galaxy, similar operations were already in motion. Human diplomats, traders, and researchers who had spent years building cover identities were beginning to activate. The galaxy had dismissed humanity as lacking in subtlety and covert capabilities. They would learn too late that humans had simply been studying, preparing, and positioning themselves with the patience of apex predators. The most dangerous aspect of human assassins wasn't their technology or their training. It was their fundamental humanity. Aliens expected killers to be cold, calculating, and obviously dangerous. They looked for the predators their own species had evolved into. They didn't recognize the threat posed by beings who could genuinely care for their targets while methodically planning their deaths. Chen had truly liked her Vraxian co-workers. She had laughed at their jokes, learned about their families, shared stories of her fictional human childhood. The warmth in her eyes when she wished them good morning had been completely authentic. And then, with the same genuine care, She had orchestrated their deaths in ways that would cause minimal suffering. This was what the galaxy couldn't understand about human nature. They weren't compartmentalized specialists like other species. They were whole beings who could hold contradictory truths simultaneously. A human could love someone and kill them, could build trust and betray it, could show genuine kindness while planning ruthless action. The Galactic Council had laughed at humanity's apparent lack of assassin castes, never realizing that they were dealing with a species where every individual could potentially become whatever the situation required. As Chen left the debriefing facility and returned to her cover identity as a minor trade representative, she was already being briefed on her next assignment. The Zarathi Confederation had been making concerning overtures about studying human genetics for peaceful research purposes. It was time for the Zarathi to learn that humans could be just as crystalline and patient as they were when circumstances required it. 6 months after the Vraxian embassy incident, the Zarathi Confederation received an unexpected gift. A human xenogeologist named Dr. Marcus Webb, whose research proposal for studying crystalline formations on Zarathi worlds had been approved after an unusually lengthy review process. Dr. Webb was everything the Zarathi expected from human academia: enthusiastic, slightly disorganized, prone to excited tangents about mineral compositions, and utterly transparent in his motivations. His credentials were impeccable, his research legitimate, and his personality so genuinely engaging that even the suspicious Zarathi security apparatus found him harmless. What they didn't know was that Marcus Webb was Sarah Chen, rebuilt from the ground up with surgical alterations, biochemical modifications, and a cover identity that had been constructed over 2 years. The enthusiasm wasn't feigned. Chen had actually developed a genuine passion for xenogeology during her preparation, because the best cover identities were built on authentic interests and capabilities. The Zarathi homeworld of Kethvasha was a crystalline maze of impossible beauty. Sentient crystal formations grew from the planetary surface in spiraling towers that sang with harmonic frequencies when the wind passed through them. The Zarathi themselves were living mineral compositions, their consciousness distributed through networks of specialized crystals that could separate and recombine at will. For a species that could literally blend into their environment and fragment their consciousness across multiple bodies, the Zarathi considered themselves the ultimate covert operators. They had been studying humanity not for peaceful research, but to understand human neural patterns well enough to create crystal-based implants that could control human behavior. The plan was elegant in its simplicity: offer Earth advanced crystal technology in exchange for allowing Zarathi cultural exchange students to study human society. These students would actually be reconnaissance specialists gathering data for the Neural Control Project. Once they understood human consciousness sufficiently, they could offer enhanced crystal implants to key human leaders, implants that would make those leaders unknowing agents of Zarathi expansion. Dr. Webb's research provided the perfect cover for investigating their progress. As he studied the crystal formations that housed Zarathi consciousness, he was actually mapping their neural networks and identifying vulnerabilities in their distributed consciousness system. The beauty of the Zarathi physiology was also its weakness. Their ability to fragment and recombine made them incredibly resilient against conventional attacks, but it also meant that their consciousness was more vulnerable to specific types of disruption. If you could introduce the right harmonic frequency into their crystal matrix, you could cause cascade failures that would fragment their awareness beyond their ability to repair. Chen spent 3 months on Kethvasha, apparently absorbed in her research while actually identifying the exact frequencies that could destabilize Zarathi consciousness without them recognizing the attack. The key was understanding that their distributed nature meant they experienced reality differently from biological consciousness. They perceived harmonic disruptions as environmental changes rather than attacks. But assassination was only part of her mission. The Zarathi had made a critical error. They assumed that human consciousness was as centralized and vulnerable as most biological species. Their research into neural control was based on fundamentally flawed premises about human cognition. Chen's real job was to accelerate that research in precisely the wrong direction. Working with genuine enthusiasm, she helped Zarathi scientists develop neural interface crystals that they believed would allow them to control human thoughts. In reality, the crystals were designed to exploit a unique aspect of human consciousness that the Zarathi couldn't comprehend: the ability to compartmentalize and hold contradictory beliefs simultaneously. The crystals would work initially, giving the Zarathi confidence in their control systems. But human consciousness was far more resilient and adaptive than they understood. The neural interfaces would train human subjects to resist and eventually reverse the control, turning the crystals into weapons against their creators. It was a trap that would take years to fully spring, but when it did, the Zarathi would find themselves facing human agents who could interface directly with crystal-based technology while remaining completely immune to Zarathi consciousness manipulation. While Chen worked on the long-term strategy, she also began identifying targets for immediate elimination. 3 Zarathi consciousness clusters were responsible for the Neural Control Project: the research coordinator, Veth Crystal Mind; the military, applications specialist Korth Harmonic Death; and the project director Zasha Zinging Dark. Each consciousness existed across multiple crystal bodies, making conventional assassination impossible. But Chen had learned that Zarathi consciousness, while distributed, still required specific harmonic synchronization between their crystal components. Disrupt that synchronization at key moments, and their awareness would fragment beyond repair. The solution was elegant and completely undetectable: introduce trace amounts of resonance-damping compounds into the harmonic crystals that regulated consciousness synchronization. The compounds would gradually accumulate over weeks, slowly degrading the harmonic coherence until consciousness collapse became inevitable. The damping compounds were derived from perfectly natural minerals found in the crystal formations Chen was supposedly studying. Her research equipment regularly introduced various substances into crystal matrices as part of legitimate geological analysis. No one questioned the minor chemical traces she left behind, because they appeared to be standard research residue. 3 weeks after Chen completed her sample collection from the consciousness-housing crystals, the first target began experiencing what appeared to be natural consciousness decay. Veth Crystal Mind's awareness started fracturing during routine, harmonic meditation, his distributed consciousness losing synchronization until his individual crystal components could no longer maintain unified thought. The Zarathi medical specialists diagnosed it as a rare but documented condition: spontaneous harmonic cascade failure, usually associated with advanced age or stress. Veth Crystal Mind's consciousness dissolved across 17 crystal components, each fragment containing memories but lacking the coherent awareness that defined individual identity. Korth Harmonic Death's collapse was even more dramatic. During a military briefing on the Human Neural Control Project, his consciousness suddenly expanded beyond his ability to maintain coherence. His awareness scattered across every crystal surface in the briefing room, creating a cacophony of overlapping thoughts and memories that drove other Zarathi consciousness clusters to temporary withdrawal. The medical investigation concluded that he had attempted an illegal consciousness expansion technique and lost control. The possibility of deliberate sabotage wasn't considered because the harmonic residue analysis showed only compounds that Korth had been exposed to through normal environmental contact. Project Director Zasha Zinging Dark's death was the masterpiece. Chen timed the resonance-damping compound introduction to coincide with Zasha's scheduled participation in the Great Harmonic Convergence, a ceremony where thousands of Zarathi consciousness clusters synchronized their awareness in celebration of their species' unity. When Zasha's consciousness attempted to join the collective harmonic, the damping compounds created a resonance void that propagated through the connection network. Instead of simply dying, Zasha's consciousness became a null space that began consuming the harmonic patterns of nearby clusters. The other participants experienced it as Zash transforming into something antithetical to Zarathi existence, a silence in the crystal song that threatened to spread. The Great Harmonic Convergence became a rout as consciousness clusters fled the expanding zone of harmonic death. Zasha's fragments were sealed away in isolation crystals, too dangerous to approach but too significant to destroy. The Zarathi response to these deaths was pure paranoia. They couldn't understand what was killing their most secure consciousness clusters, but they knew it had to be connected to their research into human consciousness. The obvious conclusion was that humans possessed some form of consciousness-based warfare capability that they had never revealed. Within days, the Zarathi Confederation voted to suspend all research into human neural control and to withdraw their cultural exchange proposals. They couldn't risk further exposure to whatever weapon humans were using to attack crystalline consciousness. Chen completed her research mission and returned to Earth with detailed scans of Zarathi neural architecture, samples of their consciousness-sustaining crystals, and complete specifications for the harmonic frequencies that could disrupt their distributed awareness. But more importantly, she had eliminated the threat of Zarathi neural control technology and established humanity as a species too dangerous to study invasively. The galaxy was beginning to learn that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't technology or military force. It was the ability to become whatever the situation required while maintaining perfect camouflage within their own apparent limitations. The Galactic Council's emergency session convened in the highest security chamber available, surrounded by detection grids designed to identify every known form of surveillance or infiltration. Representatives from 47 species sat in carefully shielded alcoves, their paranoia palpable as they discussed the growing pattern of mysterious deaths plaguing their operations. High Counselor Yethron's tentacles writhed with agitation as he addressed the assembly. "We have lost key personnel across 3 major species intelligence networks. The Vraxians, the Zarathi, and now the Kethmaran have all reported targeted eliminations of individuals involved in research or operations concerning humanity." The Kethmaran delegate's translator crackled with electronic distortion. "Our master toxicologist Jekpath died of poison, a substance our own chemists cannot identify. The compound appears to be organic in origin, but it triggered cellular breakdown patterns we have never observed. Most disturbing, it was introduced through his breathing apparatus during a secured briefing on human biochemistry." Ambassador Yethron nodded grimly. "The Zephyrians have withdrawn their proposal to study human social structures after their chief behavioral analyst died during dream sleep. Something entered her subconscious during her deepest meditative state and restructured her neural pathways. She woke speaking only in human languages before her mind completely unraveled. In the observation galleries hidden behind the council chamber, beings who officially didn't exist exchanged worried glances. The galaxy's premier intelligence services were finally beginning to recognize the pattern they had refused to see. Humanity possessed assassination capabilities that surpassed anything in known space. What they still didn't understand was the scope of the operation. At that moment, Sarah Chen, now operating under the identity of cultural liaison Elena Vasquez, was serving refreshments to the very intelligence officials who were hunting her. Her cover as part of the council's catering service was so perfect that she had been providing food and beverages to classified meetings for 6 months. The neural interface hidden beneath her artificial skin was recording every word, every biometric fluctuation, every piece of classified information discussed in her presence. But Chen wasn't alone. Hidden throughout the facility were 17 other human operatives, each with cover identities that had been developed over years. The galaxy's most secure location was thoroughly compromised, and its defenders had no idea. The irony was profound. The security systems designed to detect alien infiltration were specifically calibrated to identify non-human consciousness patterns, energy signatures, and biological markers. They couldn't detect humans because humans were exactly what they appeared to be: baseline biological entities with no exotic capabilities or hidden modifications. The modifications were there, but they were subtle enough to appear within normal human variation: enhanced reflexes that seemed like good genetics, improved cognitive processing that looked like natural intelligence, biochemical adaptations that appeared to be minor metabolic differences. The galaxy was looking for obviously engineered beings and missing the fact that humans had learned to engineer themselves in ways that preserved their fundamental humanity. As the council debated their response to humanity's mysterious capabilities, Chen was preparing to eliminate the 3 most dangerous figures in the chamber: General Vorthkek of the Hegemony Alliance, Spy Master Yithcoil of the Shadow Confederation, and High Inquisitor Zethma of the Purification Order. These 3 were coordinating a joint operation to capture Earth and dissect human society to understand their assassination capabilities. The elimination would happen during the session itself, in full view of the galaxy's most sophisticated detection systems, and it would appear to be caused by the stress of the meeting itself. General Vorthkek would die first. The hegemony military leader had a specific physiological vulnerability. His species' cardiovascular system was regulated by electromagnetic pulses generated by specialized organs. Chen had learned to modulate her own bioelectric field through meditation techniques that appeared to be simple human relaxation exercises. When she approached to refill his beverage, the subtle electromagnetic disruption she generated would cause his regulatory organs to synchronize incorrectly, triggering a cardiac cascade that would kill him within minutes. Spymaster Yithcoil presented a different challenge. Her species could detect biochemical changes in their environment and had natural immunity to most toxins, but they had one critical weakness. Their enhanced chemical sensitivity made them vulnerable to sensory overload. Chen had prepared a compound derived from perfectly harmless human pheromones that would trigger Yithcoil's chemical sensors to amplify exponentially. The resulting sensory cascade would burn out her nervous system as her own enhanced capabilities turned against her. High Inquisitor Zethma was the most dangerous target. His species possessed limited precognitive abilities that made them nearly impossible to assassinate through conventional means. They could sense hostile intent and anticipate attacks before they occurred. But Chen had learned something crucial during her months of observation. Their precognition was specifically attuned to detecting conscious intent to cause harm. Chen felt no hostility toward Zethma. In fact, she felt a kind of clinical sympathy for a being whose own gifts would make his death necessary. Her emotional state was one of professional regret rather than malicious intent. Her biochemistry reflected genuine sadness rather than aggressive preparation. To Zethma's precognitive abilities, she appeared as someone mourning a future loss rather than planning to cause one. The compound she would use on him was the most elegant of all, a substance that would interact with his own precognitive neural pathways, causing them to overload as they tried to process information from multiple timeline possibilities simultaneously. He would die of prescience, his gift becoming the weapon that killed him. As the council session continued, Chen began her approach to the targets. Her movements appeared completely natural. A catering professional efficiently managing refreshments during a long meeting. She had practiced these exact motions thousands of times until they were as automatic as breathing. The first indication that something was wrong came when General Vorthkek suddenly clutched his chest and collapsed forward onto the council table. Emergency medical systems activated immediately, flooding his alcove with healing energies and diagnostic scanners. But the cardiac cascade was already beyond intervention. His electromagnetic regulatory system had fallen into chaotic synchronization patterns that no external treatment could stabilize. Council security went to maximum alert, but their systems detected no weapons, no hostile energy signatures, no unauthorized substances in the chamber. The general appeared to have died of natural causes, a stress-induced heart failure during an intense diplomatic session. Spymaster Yithcoil's death followed within minutes. Her enhanced chemical sensors began registering impossible readings as Chen passed near her alcove, carrying what appeared to be a simple tray of beverages. The pheromone compound Chen had absorbed into her skin was so subtle that even Yithcoil's sophisticated detection abilities initially registered it as normal human biochemistry. By the time her systems recognized the overload pattern, the sensory cascade was already burning through her neural pathways. She died screaming warnings about invisible poison in the air, while her own sensors continued to amplify phantom chemical signatures that existed only in her overloaded perception systems. High Inquisitor Zethma's precognitive abilities were screaming warnings at him, but the warnings made no sense. He could see multiple timelines converging on his death, but in each possibility, the threat came from a different source. In one vision, he was killed by atmospheric processors, in another by artificial gravity fluctuations, in a third by crystalline resonance weapons. His precognition couldn't focus on a single threat because it was trying to process the temporal interference generated by Chen's compound. As she approached with his refreshment, his neural pathways began firing in increasingly chaotic patterns, trying to resolve timeline conflicts that didn't exist. He died of temporal stroke, his consciousness scattered across multiple possible futures as his precognitive abilities collapsed under recursive overload. Within 15 minutes, 3 of the galaxy's most dangerous intelligence officials had died in the most secure chamber in known space, under observation by the most sophisticated detection systems available. The autopsies would show natural deaths, cardiac failure, sensory overload, and neurological collapse. No weapons, no poisons, no evidence of any attack. But the message was unmistakable. Humanity could reach anyone, anywhere, at any time. The emergency session dissolved into panic as delegates realized that their most fundamental assumptions about human capabilities had been catastrophically wrong. If humans could eliminate targets in the Galactic Council chambers themselves, then nowhere in the galaxy was safe from their reach. What they still didn't understand was that this had been the point of the entire operation. Earth needed the galaxy to fear human capabilities without understanding their true nature. The mystique was more powerful than the reality. As long as alien species remained ignorant of how human assassins actually worked, they would continue to overestimate the threat and underestimate their ability to defend against. The aftermath of the Galactic Council massacre sent shockwaves through the galaxy that Earth's intelligence services could measure from Sol system. 17 species immediately recalled their diplomatic missions from Earth. 23 more suspended all trade negotiations. The Hegemony Alliance declared humanity a potential existential threat and began mobilizing for preemptive military action. It was exactly what Earth had been preparing for. Sarah. Chen stood in the command center hidden beneath the Mariana Trench, watching as holographic displays showed the galaxy's military forces repositioning for a coordinated assault on humanity. After 18 months of careful elimination operations, the Shadow War was about to become very public indeed. The Hegemony Alliance fleet will reach the outer system in 6 days, reported Admiral Sarah Harrison, her official death certificate still filed with the Navy Department. 47 warships, including 3 planet killers. They're not planning to negotiate. Director Chen, her old identity as field operative had been retired after the Council operation, nodded as she reviewed the tactical data. The galaxy's response was predictable, even desirable. Humanity needed to be seen as impossibly dangerous, and nothing accomplished that better than having the galaxy's most powerful military alliance declare them a threat, requiring immediate elimination. Status: report on our embedded assets, she commanded. The response came from all directions as human operatives throughout the galaxy activated communication protocols they had maintained for years. Dr. Elena Vasquez reported from the Hegemony flagship, where she had been serving as a cultural liaison specialist. Engineer Marcus Thompson checked in from the Keth Moran supply depot that would be fueling the invasion fleet. Research specialist Anna Kim confirmed her position aboard the Alliance command vessel. 43 human operatives were currently embedded within the invasion force itself, having spent years building cover identities as cultural specialists, technical advisors, scientific observers, and support personnel. The galaxy's most secure military operation had been thoroughly infiltrated before it even began. But the real masterstroke wasn't the presence of human agents. It was what they had been doing during their years of deep cover. Every major system aboard the invasion fleet had been subtly compromised, not through obvious sabotage that could be detected, but through thousands of tiny modifications that would cascade into catastrophic failures at precisely the right moments. Fuel mixtures that would burn slightly hotter than expected, creating metal fatigue in engine components. Navigation systems with drift calculations that were off by microscopic amounts but would compound over interstellar distances. Life support filters that would gradually become less efficient under combat stress. The invasion fleet was carrying its own destruction, installed piece by piece over years by technicians who were trusted members of the crew. Phase 1 is complete, Chen announced to the command center. The galaxy believes we are a mysterious threat with unknown assassination capabilities. Phase 2 begins when they realize the true scope of our infiltration. What the galaxy didn't understand was that humanity's approach to covert warfare was fundamentally different from every other species they knew. Other civilizations created specialized castes of killers, spies, and saboteurs, beings whose sole purpose was destruction and deception. These specialists were highly effective, but they were also obvious to detect once you knew what to look for. Humans had taken the opposite approach. They had made everyone a potential agent. The cultural liaison serving coffee on a military flagship was also a demolitions expert who could construct explosives from cleaning supplies. The maintenance engineer replacing air filters was simultaneously a psychological warfare specialist who could drive entire crews to madness through subtle environmental manipulation. The scientific observer cataloging alien biology was also a master strategist who could identify the critical weaknesses in any military formation. But more than that, these operatives were genuinely what they appeared to be. Dr. Vasquez really was fascinated by alien culture and had written legitimate academic papers on cross-species diplomacy. Engineer Thompson genuinely cared about the maintenance crews he worked with and had saved several alien lives through his technical expertise. Their cover identities weren't masks they wore. They were authentic aspects of their personalities that had been cultivated alongside their lethal capabilities. This was what made them impossible to detect. They weren't pretending to be harmless. They actually were harmless right up until the moment they chose not to be. The Hegemony Alliance had never faced an enemy like this. Their security protocols were designed to identify hostile agents who were infiltrating with malicious intent. They couldn't detect agents who were genuinely helpful, genuinely friendly, and genuinely valuable members of the community they were embedded within. As the invasion fleet approached Sol System, Admiral Korth Vessel Death was reviewing intelligence reports about human military capabilities. The data was frustratingly contradictory. Humans appeared to have no advanced weapons technology, no shield generators, no planet-destroying capabilities. Their largest warships were primitive fusion-powered vessels that would be obliterated by a single hegemony destroyer. Yet somehow, these same humans had assassinated key figures across the galaxy, using methods that defied detection by the most sophisticated security systems available. The tactical analysis suggested that humanity was either hiding revolutionary stealth technology or possessed some form of exotic, consciousness-based warfare capabilities. Neither assessment was correct, but Admiral Korth Vessel Death had no way of knowing that. What he also couldn't know was that Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been serving his morning meal for the past 8 months, had been slowly introducing trace compounds into his food that would make his species' redundant organ systems synchronize incorrectly during periods of high stress. The compounds were derived from perfectly natural minerals found on 17 different worlds, introduced in such small quantities that they appeared to be random contamination. From the ship's multi-species food processing systems, Admiral Korth Vessel Death would die during the opening moments of the battle for Earth, his backup cardiovascular systems failing simultaneously just when he needed them most. His death would appear to be caused by combat stress, and his second-in-command would assume control of the fleet just as thousands of other small failures began cascading. Through the invasion force, the navigation systems would begin drifting off course as microscopic errors compounded. The communication arrays would develop intermittent failures at critical moments. The weapon systems would experience power fluctuations that reduced their effectiveness by precisely the amounts needed to give human defenders crucial advantages. But the psychological warfare would be the most devastating aspect of the human counterattack. As the invasion fleet approached Earth, they began receiving transmissions that appeared to be routine human broadcasts, news programs, entertainment media, personal communications between Earth and human colonies. But embedded within these innocent transmissions were carefully crafted psychological warfare elements designed to exploit the specific neuroses and cultural fears of each attacking species. The hegemony forces heard subtle suggestions that their alliance partners were planning to claim the best resources from conquered Earth for themselves. The Kethmaran contingent received implications that the hegemony considered them expendable shock troops. The Vraxian survivors from earlier operations intercepted evidence that their supposed allies had been responsible for the embassy deaths. Within hours, the unified invasion fleet was fragmenting as mutual suspicion and paranoia spread through the command structure. Species that had cooperated for centuries began questioning each other's motives and preparing for betrayal. The humans defending Sol System watched as the most powerful military alliance in galactic history began destroying itself before the first shot was fired. But the real revelation came when the attacking forces finally engaged human ships in direct combat. The primitive human vessels fought with impossible coordination, their movements perfectly synchronized as if controlled by a single mind. Their weapons struck with uncanny accuracy despite having inferior targeting systems. Their defensive maneuvers anticipated enemy attacks with prescient precision. The secret was the human agents embedded throughout the invasion fleet. They weren't just sabotaging systems and eliminating key personnel. They were feeding real-time tactical intelligence directly to the human defenders. Every enemy ship movement, every tactical decision, every weapon recharge cycle was being transmitted to Earth's military commanders as it happened. The galaxy had prepared for war against a mysterious species with unknown assassination capabilities. Instead, they found themselves fighting an enemy that knew their every move before they made it, could turn their own systems against them, and had been preparing for this specific battle for years. Admiral Korth Vessel Death died clutching his chest as his ships opened fire on Earth's outer defenses, just as Dr. Vasquez had calculated. His replacement, Commander Yeth Glory-Seeking, assumed control of the flagship just as the navigation systems began their programmed drift toward a gravity anomaly that would disable the primary attack formation. The battle for Earth lasted exactly 4 hours and 17 minutes. When it ended, the most powerful invasion fleet in galactic history had been reduced to scattered debris and fleeing survivors who carried with them a message that would reshape the galaxy's understanding of human capabilities. Humanity didn't just have mysterious assassins. They had turned warfare itself into an art form that transcended anything the galaxy had ever imagined possible. The universe laughed at humanity's lack of assassins. Until the Wolverine arrived 6 months after the battle for Earth, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The defeat of the Hegemony Alliance had sent shockwaves through every major civilization, but the real transformation came from understanding how completely they had been outmaneuvered. Sarah Chen, now officially acknowledged as Director of Human Strategic Operations, stood before the reformed Galactic Council in a session that would have been unimaginable a year earlier. The same chamber where she had once served refreshments while eliminating key targets now hosted her as Earth's primary diplomatic representative. The irony was not lost on anyone present. The question before us, she addressed the assembled delegates, is not whether humanity possesses advanced assassination capabilities. The question is what we do with this new understanding of how warfare and diplomacy actually function in a galaxy where any individual can potentially become whatever the situation requires. The council chamber was notably smaller than it had been during previous sessions. 17 species had withdrawn from galactic politics entirely after learning the scope of human infiltration operations. Others had requested full diplomatic immunity agreements with Earth before agreeing to participate in any multilateral discussions. High Counselor Yethran, one of the few original members still serving, addressed Chen with a mixture of respect and barely controlled fear. Director Chen, our analysis of the recent conflict suggests that human operatives had been embedded within our societies for years before any formal hostilities began. This implies a level of long-term strategic planning that exceeds our previous understanding of human capabilities. Chen nodded acknowledgement. Counselor, I think you're misunderstanding the fundamental nature of human society. We didn't infiltrate your civilizations, we joined them. Dr. Vasquez genuinely enjoyed her work as a cultural liaison. Engineer Thompson really did care about maintaining your ship's environmental systems. Research specialist Kim was sincerely fascinated by xenobiology studies. She paused, allowing the implications to sink in. The mistake you made was assuming that being genuinely helpful and being strategically positioned are mutually exclusive concepts. In human culture, they're often the same thing. The Kethmaran delegate's translator crackled with agitation. But the systematic nature of the placements, the coordination of activities across multiple species and time frames, this suggests centralized planning of unprecedented scope. Actually, Chen replied, it suggests something much more troubling from your perspective. Most of our operatives received minimal central coordination. They were given general objectives and told to use their judgment about how to achieve them. The systematic nature you observed was the result of individual humans making similar decisions when faced with similar circumstances. The silence that followed was profound, as the delegates began to understand the true implications. Human strategic thinking wasn't the product of some advanced central planning system. It was an emergent property of how humans naturally approached complex social situations. "You're telling us," the Zarathi representative resonated with crystalline harmonics, "that thousands of humans independently chose to position themselves for maximum strategic advantage while maintaining genuine personal relationships with their targets? I'm telling you that humans are social creatures who instinctively understand how to build trust, identify weaknesses, and position themselves optimally within any social structure they encounter. What you call strategic infiltration, we call making friends and being useful." The psychological impact of this revelation was staggering. Every species present had encountered humans in various diplomatic, academic, or commercial contexts. They were now forced to reevaluate every interaction, every friendship, every moment of trust or vulnerability they had shared with human individuals. But Chen wasn't finished with her demonstration of human strategic thinking. "I should mention," she continued casually, "that there are currently human operatives embedded within the security details of every delegate present in this chamber. They've been there for months, having applied for positions after the battle for Earth created openings in your security organizations." The chamber erupted into chaos as delegates immediately activated their security protocols and began demanding identification verification from their own protection teams. Emergency scanners flooded the room with detection beams searching for hidden weapons, concealed identities, or any sign of human infiltration. They found nothing, because there was nothing to find. The human operatives were exactly who they appeared to be: recently hired security personnel who had passed every background check and psychological evaluation. Their human nature was perfectly obvious to any scanner. Their qualifications were genuine. Their references were impeccable. The only thing that made them dangerous was their willingness to act if their principles threatened Earth's interests. As the security chaos subsided and delegates slowly realized that their own screening procedures had been completely ineffective, Chen delivered the final element of her presentation. The galaxy's fundamental error was assuming that effective assassination requires exotic capabilities, specialized modifications, or obvious predatory traits. In reality, the most effective assassins are the ones who make you feel safe. The most dangerous infiltrators are the ones you actively want to trust. The most successful strategic operations are conducted by people who genuinely care about the communities they're embedded within. She gestured to the chamber around them. "Every human you have ever met has been a potential strategic asset for Earth. Not because we trained them to be, but because humans naturally excel at understanding social dynamics, building relationships, and positioning themselves advantageously within any community they join." The implication was clear. The galaxy could never again interact with humans without wondering whether each individual was simply a friendly cultural ambassador or a potential threat to their civilization's survival. But Chen's ultimate goal wasn't to terrorize the galaxy into submission. It was to establish a new framework for interspecies relations based on mutual respect rather than assumed superiority. "However," she continued, "I'm here to propose something different. Earth has no interest in galactic domination or systematic elimination of other species. What we want is recognition as equals in galactic society, with appropriate respect for human capabilities and interests." She activated a holographic display showing proposed treaty frameworks. "We're offering comprehensive non-aggression agreements with built-in verification protocols. Human operatives within your societies will identify themselves and transition to official diplomatic or cultural exchange positions. In return, you acknowledge Earth as a fully sovereign member of galactic civilization with all associated rights and protections." The offer was simultaneously generous and threatening. Earth was proposing to reveal and legitimize their embedded operatives in exchange for formal recognition. But the subtext was that rejecting the offer would leave those operatives in place as potential threats. "The alternative," Chen said quietly, "is continuing the current situation where none of you can be certain which humans in your societies are simply friendly individuals and which ones are strategically positioned assets of Earth's intelligence services." The vote was unanimous. Every delegate present agreed to Earth's proposed framework, establishing humanity as not just another galactic civilization, but as the species that had fundamentally redefined how interstellar politics would function. As the session concluded and delegates departed to begin implementing the new treaties, High Counselor Yethron approached Chen privately. "Director," he said, "I must ask, are you actually an assassin, or are you genuinely committed to diplomatic solutions?" Chen smiled, and for a moment he saw both possibilities simultaneously. The warm, intelligent diplomat who had negotiated a peaceful resolution to galactic tensions, and the cold, efficient killer who had eliminated his predecessors when they threatened Earth's interests. "Counselor," she replied, "I'm human." The answer is yes. The galaxy had finally learned the truth about humanity's lack of assassin castes. They didn't need specialized killers because they had evolved something far more dangerous. A species where every individual could become whatever the situation required while remaining fundamentally human. The universe had stopped laughing. Now it was learning to coexist with the most successful social predators it had ever encountered. Predators who could love you genuinely while methodically planning your destruction, who could build trust while positioning for betrayal, who could be your best friend right up until the moment they needed to be your executioner. Humanity had won not through superior technology or military force, but through the simple recognition that the most effective weapon in any conflict is the ability to be underestimated by your enemies while being indispensable to your friends. The Wolverine had arrived, and the galaxy would never be the same.